Let's welcome in Raywat Deonandan. He's an epidemiologist and an associate professor at the University of Ottawa and joins us now here on Global News Radio 640 Toronto. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Ontario looks to be the new COVID hotspot in the country. Do we know why these numbers seem to be so stubborn in this province?
That's a really good question, and I'll start by saying that, of course, the disease is many diseases. The epidemic looks different in different parts of the country, having to do with geography, population dynamics, and decision-making. But Ontario is particularly hard hit for a number of reasons. One is our population density. Another is timing of when we made certain decisions, and the third is the decisions that we made. So it's we're not as bad as New York, for example, and we're not as bad as some other hotspots, but we should be doing better than we are.
Yeah, but we're not as good as BC, who again reported only 4 cases yesterday. Good for them, but what have they done, do we know, so effectively, and what could we learn from them and apply here in Ontario?
Okay, so BC, they had a couple of things go well for them. First is luck, second is timing, and third is good decision-making. So the luck is that they happen to be on the other side of the continent. They're not near the hotspots of New York, and they weren't seeded by travelers from Europe as much as Ontario was. The other luck is that their March break happened just after ours. The good decision-making has to do with how they dealt with their situation. So they decided not to encourage travel earlier than we did. They decided to restrict workers from long-term health centers from working in multiple centers much earlier than we did. They had their PPE in place for their workers much earlier than we did. They had strong public health leadership and a central voice that was very trustworthy, and they were testing early and quickly. They did everything right, and they did it early on. That's a key part of this epidemic, is the earlier you act, the greater dividends that will pay down the road.
Yeah, do we know, is there enough communication going on between our governments? Is BC sharing some of their information with Alberta, with us here in Ontario? Do we need to be more collaborative when it comes to this, do you think?
That's a really good question. I don't know for sure. I know that the scientists are definitely in communication. Whether the governments are or not is another story entirely. And the extent to which data is made readily available is also different across the country. Every province has its own data collection system, its own data sharing system. And again, that's where Ontario fails a fair amount, is we're not very transparent, and the pipelines through which we share data are clogged. So there's a lot to fix here in this province.
All right. Before we go, just kind of pointing the finger, though, at our health officials in the province, is it important to underscore and underline the fact that COVID-19 is something we haven't really seen before? And, a lot of health officials were desperately seeking and scrambling, trying to find answers to pretty pertinent questions.